introduce our first participant, Dr. Danesh Jayatilaka, who is currently the chairman of the Center for Migration Research and Development, CMRD, based in Colombo in Sri Lanka. And he is also a research fellow at the International Center for Ethnic Studies. His achievements are far and wide, with a doctorate in economics from the University of Colombo and master's and bachelor's in business administration from the University of Jayawardenepura and California State University, respectively. Danesh's research has included labor management, social safeguards, urban development, among other critical topics. He has also received his training on forced migration from the Refugee Studies Center at the University of Oxford, and is a senior research associate in the IDP research program at the Refugee Law Initiative. Amongst this, he is also the editor-in-chief for the CMRD working papers and editorial board member for migration and development. So with this introduction, Danesh, I invite you as our first speaker. So over on to you.
Thank you, Naushin. Thank you, Gulnaz. Hello to all colleagues. My topic is underserved communities in Colombo and issues with resettling and relocating them. I'm gonna just talk about research that we did, me and colleagues, about a year ago on underserved communities here in Colombo, and then I will speak about an example of a project where resettlement took place and how they managed fairly successful resettlement and relocation of people. Just a quick, Colombo is the commercial capital of Sri Lanka. It's quite a modern city. Maybe some of you have visited it. Around 700 to 800,000 population. There are clusters of underserved communities in Colombo, over 1,000, maybe up to 1,500. And our research, we had selected 4 of these in North Colombo, and they were affected by, at least 3 of them affected by floods. And most of these communities had people who had migrated to Colombo from rural areas, from the upcountries, the tea plantations, and the north and east where the conflict took place. They had come, some of them for safety, some of them many for employment, for marriage, education, joining another family member, etc. So rural urban migration had been taking place since the colonial period, especially after the British improved the road systems and the railway lines, etc. So our study was looking at why while the conditions at these locations are quite difficult when you look from outside, why some of these people are quite attached and attracted to these locations, and what was the pull factors, and what was actually the push factors pushing people out. And my colleagues, I have to credit my colleagues because they did most of the research, used a number of models. Was McGregors' well-being model that was looking at subjective well-being, material conditions, etc. And when we did use this, we found that the different spaces that people were occupying, when it comes to material like housing, their space, we even looked at jobs, etc. These were attractions to them. They came here because these places were cheap. They were close to employment places. It was easy to access transport. So that was a positive for them. When it comes to relational aspects of being in these locations, the social networks, etc., again, that was a plus. especially migrants against non-migrants, people who had been there, and informal workers against people who had more secure jobs. Migrants and informal workers used a lot of social networks to connect and be attached to each other and help each other out, etc. So that was the plus. The sort of the negative was the subjective well-being component of the model. There was unhappiness and unhappiness came in sort of shame, maybe some fears, because these places had crime, they had drugs, they had gangsters. There were even killings when we were conducting our research. There were 4 people who were shot. So they were concerned about their children, about safety, about the girls, and even being there, they were ashamed to tell their friends, their families they were living there. So there was this tension between these three spaces of what was materially there, but the connections that were there, and how you felt, and each one was sort of moving. So that was quite interesting to us. So there was, and those who wanted to leave, you couldn't draw a generalized category. It depended on the sort of job people were doing, the family composition, where they had come from, if they had memories of conflict, etc. Their choices would be different, etc. So now, when you have this sort of complexity on whether you want to stay or you want to leave, and there were aspects that they aspired for, when resettlement programs are taking place in Colombo, how do you address these? And because it is difficult unless you just snatch people and put them somewhere else. There are projects happening in Colombo, because Colombo is urbanized, is developing very fast. There are investments coming in, there are projects, roads, highways, etc. And different donors, different ministries are involved in these. Some of these projects are better than others. And an example I just want to give here is a project by the World Bank. It's called the Metro Colombo Urban Development Project. And they were using quite good resettlement and standards in their projects. This particular program had about 56 sub-projects. It had a flood component, an infrastructure component, and the projects where underserved communities were there and they had to relocate them. There was a lot of effort to minimize relocation, because the understanding was, when you take people out of their spaces, from their worlds, etc., it caused so many disruptions. And so minimizing of resettlement, relocation was one of the starting points. And then there was a whole series of safety measures they were using, consultations and plannings and surveys and assessments, etc. And when those few who were moved, because they were either people who had encroached into government land, or they were in the project line, or they were in river banks or railway, next to railway lines, which are quite dangerous, they were given, they were moved to flats, and those flats were actually just 1 to 3 kilometers away, which is really good, because one of the issues is that when you move people, their livelihoods get disrupted, etc. And they were moved to flats, and when they were moved to flats, they were asked which floor you want to go to. Do you want to all be together? So there's a lot of asking and And then when they moved, they were given a month, they were given transport, etc. And social officers from this particular project would follow up and etc. And compensations were really good. If their jobs were affected, they were given a financial package, etc. And so these individuals were housed in these flats. We didn't do a post-evaluation of whether they were happy or not, but the procedures they were using was quite impressive. Because this thing of the complex lives the communities were living and their aspirations and their needs, quite complicated. Basically, yes, this connection of how donors and projects connect with community needs. This is a very small example. I can't generalize into Colombo because Colombo, those, like I said, the different communities they're very different, and projects that work in Colombo are quite different. But you can pick lessons from such programs. Yeah, thank you.